Hello and welcome to this lecture. We'll be talking about the conflict of ideas. Mainly, we will be focusing on the types of international conflicts. We have six main types: ethnic, religious, ideological, territorial, governmental, and economic conflicts. And each one of them have its own features and segments and points, and we will look at them one by one. But then, if you look carefully at these types, you will find the basic structure and element of these conflicts are somehow and sometimes strongly different from each other. Basically, if you look at the ethnic hatred, it's something of intangible conflict, which it's difficult to handle, and it's very difficult to be able to grasp and understand well, because the feasibility does not really was not there. And same thing when you talk about religious ideological conflicts of and these kind of conflicts of ideas, because they are not an action feasible things you can really touch or easily spot. So the elements of these conflicts, as you can see, they really are intangible conflicts, and we will look at them in details. These mostly you call them conflicts of ideas. But then, if you would like, we will look at the other side, which is the identity based source of international conflicts. You see, it's connected much to nationalism. And nationalism is one of the ideas where people are fought because of their own identity and belonging to one state or entity. We will look at this as well in more details. So, number one, we would like to begin looking at the idea of nationalism. Nationalism as a concept is something feasible. We can understand it, we can look at it, we can understand what exactly the link between you as a human being and your own nation belonging. So, it's about devotion to the interest of one's own nation over others. That kind of devotion, it's the main link between one person and his own entity, and this entity could be the state, a territory, it could be a semi-independent state. It doesn't have to be always an independent state. This is lead us to look at later on at the attempt by many separatist movements to separate and have secession to part or sections or even one territory from the country itself. So nationalism is that kind of devotion, or the strong link between one person and the nation itself. And it's again like most difficult type of conflict in which intangible element could be the hatred and the religious and ideology. But then if you compare it with the nationalism, it is having one of the elements of psychological and fictional. So it is not only looking at the physical side. So we have two main components when we look at the nationalism. The physical component is the attachment from one person or one community to one place, and the belonging to one community as a nation. But then the intangible element, it's the that feeling of belonging to one nation, which that makes it unique from other nations. In fact, the identity-based source of international conflict shape historical conflicts. They were shaped by nationalism as the link between identity and international recognized states. So most of the conflicts we had in the past mostly were about the statehood, nationalism, and identity-based conflict. Again, we're still talking about the nationalism in this slide, as you can see, which is here the most important force in world politics in the past 2 centuries. Look at the past 2 centuries. For the past 200 years, you find most of the conflicts were about nationalism and belonging to those nations or nation states as well. So a nation is a population that shares an identity, usually including language and culture. It's an identity belonging to one community, and this is in a wider perspective. We call that the nation because number of people living in mostly in one specific location or place or country, sharing the culture, the language, and other features between them. In around 1500s, meaning talking about the 15th and 16th centuries, you look at the France and Austria began to bring entire nations together into single states. And you know the development where we had the Westphalia Agreement between European countries in 1648, and then we will look in from that time at the modern state, and how much had this influence on people and their own identities and belonging to one state, leading to what is called self-determination. We have witnessed and we have seen this in many aspects in many regions in the world. One of which we witness nowadays the conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan about the territories between them. A territory was occupied by Armenia almost 30 years ago. That's today the people of that territory between the two countries somehow wanted to declare independence, which almost no country in the world have recognized, because we have to look at the conditions, and this could be one of the main points to look at in the next semester. We will look at the independence and the state and the formation of a state. Not easy to declare self-determination. This is not something really could be easy by any community or any region. You look at Spain, for example, the Basque and Catalonia. Look at Scotland. I'm not talking about the historical aspect now, but we will look at the past and as one of the leading point to what we have today. But self-determination of the people, it's not something new. It's something has existed long ago. Self-determination today, where communities, nations, ethnicities, sometimes even having wanted to have the independence to form one state, one other region, because they feel that they have their own way of living, an identity they have is not the same like the wider identity in the wider society. All right, look at the ethnic conflict. The ethnic conflict, it's one of the most difficult conflicts, and we have seen this in many places in the world. Look at India now. Look at Kashmir. It's devastating when you look at the situation in Kashmir, which has been separated, which has been somehow like the people devastated by the entire situation, where they have no independence, and the same region have been divided between India, Pakistan, and China. So the people most likely want to have their own independence because they think they have their own ethnicity. somehow they are different from every other countries. But again, like if you look at the ethnic groups where you have the Basque community and the Catalonian community in Spain and other regions in the world, where people seek to have independence, one of which we had just witnessed a few years ago, Kurdistan. It's a region within Iraq itself, but the people living there originally they call them Kurds. This is the biggest group in the world. We have in the world almost million 30 million Kurds divided between many states, as we're going to see in a few minutes in the map. So the ethnic groups are the large group of people who share ancestral language, culture, religious ties, and common identity, often from bases for nationalist sentiments, where they have as well territorial control closely tied to aspiration of ethnic groups for statehood, and this is applicable most likely to Kurds in some countries in the Middle East, specifically in Iraq. And this is why we had the attempts just a few years ago. We had the referendum of independence of Kurdistan, where the Iraqis, Iranians, and Turks refused to accept such result of referendum because that was made away from those countries. Because we have to look at the sovereignty of the country itself as well. When we have ethnic populations or minorities in territories controlled by rival ethnic groups, they may be driven from their land as what we call here ethnic cleansing. And this is happening we look at Myanmar, it's a region where the Muslim community were expelled and many of them went to live in neighboring countries. But again, we have to distinguish between what is genocide and what is ethnic cleansing, because even we have the experts, the legal experts, who were mixing between ethnic cleansing and genocide. Genocide, in fact, it's about systematic exterminating the community or the ethnicity, extermination. We had this, if you go back years before 1990s, between Hutu and Tutsi in Rwanda, where we had a campaign of genocides, even though some experts call it ethnic cleansing, but the fact it's genocide, it's about exterminating the whole community, killing them. So it depends on the mass killing, and it depends of how much really have been done in the field. So why this is happening, why we have causes of ethnic hostilities? Most likely because there are long-standing historical conflict over a specific territory or natural resources, or one of the ethnic groups' economic exploitations or political domination of another. It's about kinship group, where many families or many tribes come to work together and share the interest and the values and share the language or the money or the wealth. They constitute a community or the ethnicity, and they start fighting each other. And this is happening, and it did happen in Africa and in the Middle East many times in the past. And even now, we have in some places, we say some of the conflicts somehow have been overshadowed by tribes and ethnicities, even though people living in one state sharing the same values to the wider expectations. But again, somehow the shadow of tribes and ethnicity can always loom over such conflicts. Keep looking deeply in and at the causes of ethnic hostility. You will find group identity, where people having the value of their own group, considering these values to be higher and more sacred and holy values, and their identity is better than other ethnic groups' identity. So the group identity can constitute one of the main causes of conflict. And this leads us to talk about ethnocentric, which is meaning here bias within the same group, like in a group bias, ethnocentric, where the focus will be on the group and its own benefit and its own beliefs at the expense of others. They value their own ethnicity at the expense of others, and this can lead to conflict with other ethnicities. But then, how can we overcome such ethnic animosities between traditionally hostile nations? We have to use education. Education is important. Look, we in Oman have witnessed conflict in 1965 to 1975. It's not about ethnicity, no, it's about ideology. But even though we had the education was part of the solution. This is one, it's about ideology. But again, education can fix the whole situation, as we will look at Rwanda 1990s, with I mentioned just a few minutes ago, the Tutsi and the Hutu were fighting each other, and we had kind of extermination by each one trying to exterminate or to eliminate the other community. The fact is, now Rwanda becoming one of the best developed states in Africa. We have speed development and a fast development, and where we have good infrastructure, excellent relationship within the same communities, within the same society, between different communities and ethnicities. So how come we witnessed in 1994 in Rwanda the killing of almost 900,000 people, mostly killed by machetes, which is about kind of a sharp, large knife. They killed each other. Now 900,000 people, it's a big number within almost 100 days. It's unbelievable. Now people come back to work together and eat with each other and share the culture and the language. People come because of the education. Now the investment in education, forgiveness between the two ethnicities was really important to be able to bridge the gap and live a decent life. Look at this map here. Come back to the Kurdish areas. We have almost 30 million. We have some figures estimating the number of Kurds in the world, saying that about 50 million or 60 millions. But the most figure we have, most likely it's about 30 million, around 30 million Kurds in the world, most likely living in Iraq, Syria, Iran, and Turkey. Definitely those people living in those countries having the full citizenship, and they are part of the nation, part of the state. They don't have a separate nationality, even though they think and they believe always they have their own identity, which is somehow different from other local identities. The fact is, Kurds have never had a independent state in their life, even though they have one of the biggest, if not the biggest, ethnic communities in the world. They live as well in European countries, in North America, but most likely, as I mentioned here, like Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Turkey. But they live like, let's say that in Turkey, about 10 million Kurds living same life like any other citizens. They are citizens of the country. They have the full citizenship. Some of them are members of the parliament, some of them having very high or senior positions in the government. So, but again, like we cannot judge the whole community based on the interests of some But again, like what exactly needed when you look at the Iraqi side, look at the Iraq, north of Iraq, few years back, the community or the ethnic group in Iraq, in the area called Kurdistan, wanted to have the independence with the help of regional and international countries. They wanted to have the independence. They formed the referendum. They had the referendum, which 99% stated they wanted to have the independence from Iraq and they have their own state. But this conflict with what? This idea of independence of region conflict with the overall sovereignty of the state. So legally, not everybody can easily have separation of one region. Otherwise, this can lead to many ethnic groups or militias in the world asking for the separation, not asking, fighting for the separation, and they can announce the independence in their own states. This is not the situation. By international law, we have independence, sovereign state, and they have been respected by the international community. Separation of one region, this would mean that we have to have conditions for the separation and acceptance by the international community. And this, as we're going to see it in other course, basically depends on the ability of the separatists to hold power in that region and having a prevailed security and stability and able to lead and to manage without the intervention of other countries, even from the host and the original country. This can lead to the international community being able to support such kind of separation. But we had the many cases, as we're going to see, even in Scotland, where we had the referendum where people of Scotland refused to have the independence from the UK because they think it's much better for them to stay with the UK for many benefits. In fact, this is the picture. If you look at this young lady, she's from Russia. Oh, well, I mean, she's from Ukraine, but originally Russian, who lived in Ukraine for all his life or her life. She was fighting as part of the militia which were formed in Ukraine with Russia at the time where we had the conflict between Russia and Ukraine on the Crimea, that kind of region. So that kind of ethnicities could be sometimes complicated, where somebody who lived his life or her life in one country, but they still believe they belong to another country. Like, let's say we have an Indian community in the United States. I don't know how many millions, or Hispanic community in the United States, or a huge number, many millions of Hispanic living in the United States, especially in the South, and want to have independence or separation of the South of the United States. Yeah, for example, I'm not saying this could be the case, but you never know what's happening in many countries over the next many years. Are we going to encourage such situation? Or no, definitely no, because every country in the world has its own sovereignty and independence and has to be respected by the outside countries and communities and by the legal and international system. But again, what happens sometimes, the individual person who can feel she is ethnically belonging to another country or to the smaller group within a wider country. That's why some individuals from the Muslim communities in Europe consider themselves to be the enemy of European countries, leading to some of them participating in some terrorist activities against their own countries, believing they are different ethnicity or having different ideology or faith. So this kind of conflict has to be taken into consideration when you look at the situation. I know in the United States, for example, it's having the culture of melting pot, where everybody mostly melting in the whole culture. It's a wider culture, and everybody participating based on the how much they can contribute to the country. And this is somehow unique, even though that in many countries we still witness conflicts within the same country based on ethnicities, especially in some Asian countries. Move to the religious conflict. Religious conflict, it's about the faith. Believing religious or religion is the core of the community's value system in much of the world. You see, I don't know how many in the world are having faith, but we have faith, people with faith, we have agnostic, an atheist. So we have everybody have his own way of believing, but most people in the world are of faith. Religious communities have their own values. So when overlaid on ethnic and territorial conflicts, religion often surfaces as the central and most visible division between groups. There's nothing inherited. In fact, there's nothing inherited in religion that mandate conflict. And this exists in every single religion in the world, in Islam, in Christianity, in Judaism, in Buddhism, and so on and so forth, because people with faith, the fact, the original thing with faith is values, respect, the mandate peace. Nothing, in fact, mandate conflicts. But the problem is with the people who apply, who implement such kind of faith. Those people, those individuals or group of people translate the faith in their own way, based on their own interest. So the fact, if you look deeply, in every single faith in the world, they have peace, and interest for the whole community and for the whole humanity. People exploit this, yes. So we do have fundamentalist movements in the world. Not only Islamic fundamentalists, we have even Christian fundamentalists, Jewish fundamentalists, Buddhist fundamentalists, and so on and so forth. So fundamentalism is not about one faith, it's not about one religion, it's about the individuals who understand and interpret and apply the faith the way suits them and can benefit their own interest. So they become fundamentalists in the way they would like to twist the meaning and of the faith they belong to benefit their own interest. Unfortunately, we have witnessed recently many of this, as we have many Muslim, or they call them Islamic movements in many parts of the world. I'm moving here to the picture of, look at this. This is a tank, as you can see, with the flag of ISIS, Daesh. And Daesh was, and still somehow, but it's not like functioning like before, and like a few years ago, it was active and functioning and working and attacking in many parts in the Middle East, especially in Syria and in Libya and in Iraq. The fact, this picture you can see now, it's a tank in Iraq, where those group of people were able to take control of some cities in Iraq, and rule and decide the fate of the people. That was the situation in Syria. But we had the fight of the local governments, the local security forces, the whole international community. In fact, the whole international community were fighting those extremists, fundamentalists, terrorists who twisted the meaning of Islam and they interpreted their own way. They created their own conceptual meaning and interpretation and apply it the way they like it, which is completely destroying and distorting the nice picture of Islam. The ideological conflict is not exactly the same. Like, we do have to think about the difference and how much in common between ideological conflict and religious conflict. But ideological conflict is wider, is wide perspective, like we have here, like we have in the religion. We have ideology symbolize and intensifies conflict between groups and states more than it causes them. Ideology is, in fact, it's thinking, it's belief, it's concepts, it's theory. هو الفكر ما هو الفكر عند الناس فكر الأشخاص يعني ideology of ideology, which is the meaning exactly that it's the way of thinking or the belief in one idea, believing in an idea. This could be an idea which is away from faith and religion, which can lead to mobilize whatever idea they have. People, ideological people can be, let's say, think about communists or communism once was an ideology. Yes, even though it was like people consider it to be an economic system and political system, but it's an ideology where many people were fighting the fight in the Middle East based on the ideology of communism, even though they were not living in a communist country. Again, I don't want to be going wider to look at every even single idea, but I want you to think about gender as well, and feminism. Do you think really gender and feminism could be an ideology where people believe in it? I know this is disputed area in many countries. I know in the West things have changed completely for the past 50 years, and we cannot talk the same thing in the West, especially in Europe and America, like we can talk about it in the Middle East. But we have to think about it, why this is happening, how much it changes we have had. And this kind of ideologies have kind of impact on different societies and states. Still, we have to look at we have conflict of interest will be much easier to look at than looking at the conflict of ideas. Conflict of ideas, like ideology and faith, it's going to be difficult to dig deep down, to go inside the person, understand his or her own beliefs and means and ideology. But if you look at nationalism, economic conflict, it's about money, territorial conflict, that would be much easier to understand the conflictual aspect and the parties and what the conflict is about. So the conflict of interest would be much easier to look at than the conflict of ideas. Moving now to look at territorial dispute as the final for today. The last type of conflict we look at today, territorial dispute, it's having the means of controlling territory using most likely military activities, military actions. This would lead to secession of territory, province, region, leaving an existing state, that territory. When we capture, when we occupy, that is a military control of another region. This could lead to ethnic cleansing, or you could have the same people staying in the same province or in the same region, but driving out or massacre of designated ethnic population could be the result of this kind of situation. This is one thing, this is secession, of course. The second would be interstate borders, where we have between states who have conflicts. The role of the norms of territorial integrity have to be always accepted and applicable. And what is the meaning? The meaning of the role of the norms of territorial integrity, that we have to keep the integrity of every state, respect of sovereignty of every single state. No attack should be accepted. A state who been recognized in the United Nations and by the international community have to be respected by its own boundaries, all its boundaries and territory. And we say territorial integrity, including water, space, and land. We do have that, what is called here, that kind of lingering disputes. And the example of Kashmir, I know that we could see even here in the slide, it says Israeli borders, but the fact is this is conflicted area. Like we believe in the Middle East, almost most people believing this is not about territory, it's about occupation. It's a full occupation. It's not about territory, but we will look at the other side of the story and how some scholars in many countries in the world can consider it to be territorial dispute. But the fact is not, it's occupation of other people's land. Dispute when we have territory dispute between nations, between countries, and we have this conflict going on, and we can understand this basically an attack was on another nation and another people or other territory, and this lead to conflict and can lead to conflict resolution. But occupation is taking the land of other nation by force, and this is illegal under international law. Territorial water, you're going to look next semester at the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS, which states that 3 miles limit to territory of the state, 12-mile limit to shipping, and 200-mile limit. I'm talking about nautical, okay? Nautical miles, 200 nautical miles limit to exclusive economic zone, EEZ, and which is allocated for fishing and mineral rights. And the airspace above the state, the airspace have to be respected, and it's belong to the state itself up to a limit, definitely. But we have some dispute between experts and between even the experts who are trying to put the definition of the airspace. What is the sovereignty of the state? To what limit exactly? How up we can go for the sovereignty of the state? There's no specific there's no specific limit. There's no specific limit in the legal system or the international law, but it can go as up as high as could be possible. And this is somehow organized between the aviation authorities between the states. This is the picture you can see. This is from Scotland. Vote. Say vote no, vote yes. Scotland, a few years back, people in Scotland voted for no. No leaving the United Kingdom. That was a referendum. Some senior politicians want to have separation of Scotland as an independent state because originally Scotland was independent from the UK. Is not a UK. I mean, UK, it's England, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and Wales. But UK is not England exactly. England is part of the UK. So the people of Scotland consider to be having their own culture and ethnicity. They want to have independence. But wisely enough, they voted no because they would like to stay with the UK, as the UK is a member of the United Nations Security Council. And the UK as well is one of the strongest countries in Europe. So Scotland, having the benefit of the oil, they have the oil, and could be one of the strong countries in Europe maybe one day if they have the independence. But again, like being part of the UK would be better for them, at least for now. Now, what ignite the thinking again for the past few months, the Brexit, UK Brexit from EU, that may lead to Scotland to have another referendum in the future asking for separation and independence from the UK, and this could eventually, they could have their own state. I mean, now look, now Scotland have their own parliament. They have the parliament. They have their own government, but it's still under the government of United Kingdom. It's kind of having semi-independence. This is a map. We look at the South China Sea, we look Vietnam, China, Taiwan, Philippines, Malaysia, Brunei, and between them we have how many islands we have? We have many islands. I don't know how many exactly, but we have many islands between those states, and those islands constitute a source of wealth for many reasons for whoever control them. But then we will look at in international law that the 200 nautical miles as EEZ are inapplicable to those islands because they can impede the navigation in the high sea. But we have conflict over these islands between many states. The last slide. Look at this. China have built just recently an artificial island. Claiming they want to claim 200 nautical miles. And when you talk about 200 nautical miles, it's about gas and mineral and the wealth of the sea. This is illegal under international law because this was built. It's an artificial. When you talk about the islands where we can apply the 200 nautical miles, you talk about natural. Look at the conflict between Turkey and Greece now, and mostly about the islands after the Second World War. And Turkey felt like it lost some of the prestigious and some of the wealth and some of the control over very important islands with very close to their own territory. So islands can cause conflict between countries, and this is the situation is happening now in the east side of Mediterranean between Turkey and Greece. Why? Because look at the gas. Everybody's looking for the gas. It's a source of wealth and can get advantage for whatever country. Right, for now, I would like to thank you. We have spent the past almost 43 minutes talking about the types of conflict. I'm gonna see you. We're gonna be having discussions soon again on the same topic and other topics. But if you have any question, just look again at the slide and at the video. And if you have anything in mind, take notes and we can discuss it. Thank you very much. Bye for now.